Gary, obviously don't want any distractions. There's a good run of momentum right now at Stoke City, but with what happened with James McLean last weekend, obviously he's only human, he's reacted to a situation. What's your own view and opinion on what's happened?
I think the first bit is in terms of the reaction from the away fans. You know that in that circumstance you're going to get some form of abuse, and I think it's about containing yourself and reacting in the, or not reacting at all really, because you know that's what, you know, when you have those beliefs, you appreciate that it's going to be a big situation on a weekend like that. I think that first thing I've got to say is, and we spoke to James about it, I think it was out of frustration, probably ill-judged, but certainly, you know, criticising the minority of our fans is not, you know, not the way to go, and we spoke to him about that. We certainly can't condone that. But I think when you understand the background to his beliefs, and you see that, you know, his family have had death threats, you see that his wife and kids have had abuse constantly, you see that he's been sent stuff in the post, which I've seen recently from fans, and you can understand in a way why he reacts, or you know, he's only, like you said, he's only human. But like I said earlier, you know, we can't condone certain parts of those actions, but we can understand some parts of it just because the abuse is pretty bad, you know. But we're trying to move forward. You know, I think that the club have spoke to James about it. It's, like I said, it's certainly not something that we want to condone.
What about your own set of fans though, because there is a minority from Stoke City that also abused him, and he's taken abuse from them as well?
Yeah, look, early in the season when we lost to Wigan, there was a majority that abused me. So you know, you've got to, sometimes you have to not react to that.
It's politics and football in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, again, and I don't want to get into the nature of it. You know, I believe, my belief is that everyone has a freedom of speech. Everyone has a freedom to follow the path that they want to follow. But what you can't then do is, if you choose that, you can't then react to the abuse. You can't then react to the criticism. You know, and it's as simple as that. And James knows that. I think it was a heat of the moment thing that he realised he shouldn't have done. You know, so.
And what about the club's own review and investigation into it? Is that all done now?
No, look, I'm the manager. I pick the team. I pick the players. I try to motivate the players. I try to win matches. You know, the club want to look into it, and that's something that I think is ongoing. So that's the club's responsibility to do that. And
going into this weekend, then obviously it still is Remembrance Weekend. It's still going to be that period too. What are you hoping for? What are you hoping, you know, to get from your discussions with James, and also what you've said here openly about all sets of fans and people?
I'm hoping to get a player that performs out on the pitch. That's the only thing we're hoping to do. We spoke about the other side of it, and that's something that, you know, we've sort of covered really. But I think the main bit is to get a performance out on the pitch, because you know, you get judged most of the time on what you do out there, and if you're performing well, I think there's an element of leniency in some of the things if you're not performing as well, and of course people are going to jump on that as part of it. So you know, listen, it's a big game for us this weekend. We've been in pretty good form in terms of this recent, or probably the last 10 games in some ways, and really it's about us trying to focus on picking the right team first and foremost, and trying to get a good performance. And if James is part of that, then you know, we're looking for him to perform as well.
Yeah, we touched at the beginning about momentum, isn't it? And you're going into this international break as well. It'd be nice because you are like getting where you want to be right now, aren't you?
Yeah, look, we're again, when you start the season like we did with, I think, two losses and 2 draws from the first 4 games, and of course you're going to be playing catch up on some teams that have got 8 or 9 points to your 2 points. You know, so that's the reality. But if you look over the last 10 games, we've been pretty competitive. Over the last 6 games, we've been even more competitive. So you can argue that we've had a poor start, and we've showed good signs of improvement ever since then in every little period that we've been in. You know, I think we had an issue with defending as a team, conceding too many goals. We were scoring goals. We've rectified that and had to work incredibly hard to do that. The balance has tipped a tiny bit in that favour, and we need to now readdress the balance so we defend really well and we attack really well, you know, and that's our challenge. But I've said it before, I believe we'll improve. I think I said it after about the third or fourth game. I think we'll improve as the season goes on, and I think we're certainly showing that. We've got a long way to go. We've still got a lot of improvement to make, you know, but I think we're showing some much more encouraging signs.
Looking forward to the game. It's going to be a difficult game. We know what happened in the Carabao Cup game. But have you got any thoughts in terms of how we could perhaps, now we're defending better, score more goals? Would you consider changing the formation this weekend?
I don't genuinely think it's a formation. I've watched every game back. I've watched probably every chance we've had back, and we've actually had. Whilst we haven't, if you define it on goals and shots on target, then of course the statistics don't look as good as we like them to look. If you define it on opportunities in the final third to create a chance, we've had lots of them. We've had lots of good positions. You know, you saw Tom Edwards flash 3 or 4 balls across the box where you would expect our strikers to gamble. So I think it's more a case of getting into better positions and perhaps not waiting for the perfect goal, rather than changing formation. And why aren't we creating as many chances? I think we're creating some really good opportunities to create the chances, and it's just that last decision, or it's that little bit of devilment in the box to go and make something happen. So I think it would be more, rather than a formation change necessarily, it would be more looking at personnel and looking at, you know, have we got someone in the group that's desperate to create a goal in the final third, and it might be giving one of those players or more than one of those players a chance to do that. Because of course what you do is, it's like anything, you know, if we're conceding goals, you look at making changes. If we're not scoring goals, unfortunately, those players, you have to look to make changes. I think we've got players in the building who can score the goals. I think we've got players out on the pitch that will score goals. It's just whether we can find a short-term solution this weekend. Because
obviously at this moment in time, Stoke are doing much better away from home in terms of results than they are at home. And you've now got Tom Ince out having had the operation, and you've got probably Mamadou and Eric fit again. What is the injury update?
The injury update is, I think, virtually everyone has trained the last couple of days. We've had a really good week. This morning was probably the brightest session we've had, with absolutely horrific conditions. I think at one point we were out there training in that while, you know, likes of Fraser was sat in his nice comfy office, you know, eating biscuits and dunking it in his tea. So it wasn't a dig at your waistline, mate, by the way. So I think, look, we're you know, you have to make sure that everyone's ready to be fit to perform, and sometimes training for 2 or 3 days might not dictate that, but we've got pretty good options. I think there's only Tom Ince who had an operation yesterday. Operation went well, hopefully, and he'll be back pretty soon. Other than that, I think everybody is trained and is available.
And without wishing to get involved in the politics of the poppy wearing or non-poppy wearing, the supporters of Stoke will be expecting some form of, if you pick James McLean and if he comes on, I'm sure there'll be a certain amount of hostility from people he's described in the terms he has. Have you got anything you'd like to say to the supporters? Obviously we need unity. Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I've said. I've said, you know, that we can't condone it. We want all our fans to certainly be behind every one of our players. You know, and I'm not going to go into the fact that I don't also believe that our fans should abuse our own player for a political belief, you know. But the reality is, like you say, we need synergy. We're making good progress. We need everybody together. I understand it's a difficult weekend for everybody. You know, if you don't have the same belief as a vast majority of us, but at the same time, you know, we're here to win games of football as well. You know, and we need to. I think if you look over the last 18 months, there's probably been too much divide at the club, and there's been too many poor performances that have created a little bit of negativity, and we want to try to continue to be positive and continue to move forward. But I also understand that there'll be 1 or 2 out there that were probably not best pleased by the comments. And I'm assuming as a group of players, when they all get together and train, they just forget about this situation with James McLean. He's a valued member of the squad, and that is how it should continue. Yeah, it is. Look, we've got lots of different nationalities, lots of different religious beliefs. I don't think you can start to look at that and you know,
not work as hard with somebody because of their own opinion. You know, that's you have to respect that. And James is a popular member of the group. You know, so the players have got behind him. The players have worked hard. Of course, you know, we all appreciate that there's things you can do and stand up for, and there's ways of going about that. I spoke to James about it, you know, but ultimately he's frustrated with the whole weekend. I think he's one that almost didn't want to say anything about it and kind of wanted to leave everything alone. But you also appreciate that sometimes, you know, particularly the club giving their statement before the weekend's games, that you want to get it out there and you want to kind of try and cover it before it becomes a problem. So I think it's a little bit unavoidable in some ways. And I won't say the quicker this weekend is over, the better, because of course we're all paying our tributes, but ultimately, you know, it's football that we need to try and focus on as well, and we want the team to be performing to the max.
And finally, on this point from me, it's going to be a difficult situation for you, because you obviously brought James McLean to the club, and you're going to be hung out to dry whatever you do. If you select him, people will say you shouldn't. If you don't select him, people will say it's a political decision.
Yeah, so if I can't win either way, then the reality is I have to do what I think is the right thing to do. We always knew that, you know, that there's always a chance that, you know, that type of signing is going to create a little bit of a stir. But again, I'll reiterate, when I brought James to the club, it was about what I thought he can do, what I think he can do on the football pitch. I don't think we've seen the best of him due to his injury, due to a very, very fractured pre-season. You know, so what I would like to try and do is try and get the very best out of him to spur us on to where we need to be. But I appreciate that's going to be a very mixed reaction to whatever decision I make. But you know, I stand behind him as a footballer. I stand behind him as one of our squad members, and I'll work as hard as I can to try and get him playing for Stoke City and showing the desire and the drive that, you know, you could argue has been lacking for 18 months in the team.
And finally from me, Sam Clucas was on the bench last week and another week's training. How's he looking in training? Yeah,
it's been really good. Yeah, we know he's a top player. You know, we know he's been moving even better as it goes on. I think the difficult thing for any manager, and it's me that makes that decision, is, you know, when will you really be ready until you're thrown into the mix, whether that's off the bench, which is always the easiest way. But if we feel it's right, then of course we'll start him from the beginning. I think he's in a position now where his match fitness, of course, isn't going to be what it needs to be, but he's certainly training fit to get out there and play. You know, and I think the quicker we can get him involved, the better, which was why we put him on the bench at the weekend. And now the decision really is, you know, does he stay on the bench and have an impact for us off the bench, or does he start a game and we'll see what he's all about. So we'll find out come Saturday.
Thank you.
Football questions.
I was going to say that players are used to getting stick from their supporters, but do you think it's fair that they should have to put up and endure racist chants and things being thrown on the pitch, including bottles and flares that they've had thrown in the season?
Well, sorry, let this be the last one.
Yeah. What I'd say is, as a general question, because what I obviously don't want is a big headline that Gary Rowett thinks it's unfair that the fans should do that. You know, so as a general question, I don't think any person should be subject to racism, should be subject to abuse for their religion, should be subject to abuse for their beliefs, whether that's physical, verbal, or whatever it is. You know, but the reality is, we live in a elite sport environment where, you know, there's a number of fans, and you know, what people say is not always what you want to hear, but that's as far as it goes. And that's just a general view. That's not aimed at anything in particular. It's just a generalised view, in my opinion.
Can I ask you about the Forest game? It was billed by some people as being a match between the two big spenders of the league. Do you think that's fair to call Stoke one of the biggest spenders?
I think it's fair to say that both clubs have spent quite a lot of money this summer, but I think you could also argue that teams that have been in the Premier League, you know, the season before, you know, the likes of, or you know, within the last 2 or 3 years, the likes of Aston Villa, the likes of Middlesbrough, there's a lot of teams around that have spent similar levels to try and get into the Premier League, and you know, there's a big pot of gold waiting at the end of the rainbow, isn't there? So you know, I think when a club comes down from the Premier League, I think the expectancy is that they're going to go bounce right back up easily, you know. But the reality is, it's an incredibly competitive division. You can look at a number of teams that over the past 2 or 3 seasons have strengthened, you know, massively in terms of the finances they've spent, and everyone's desperate to try and get there, which is why it's such a great league. It's so even. There's so many good teams in it. I think the standard goes up every single season. I read Peter Crouch's comments recently, but you know, he believes the Championship has moved on massively, and I would say I would agree. So yeah, it's incredibly competitive. Yes, we've spent money and we expect to be in a better position, but what it goes to show sometimes is that the money doesn't actually solve every problem, and you've still got to work around a number of issues.